The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade suspended above my neck. Put your signature on this resignation document, or we terminate your employment effective immediately. Those were the precise words spoken to me. After 21 years of unwavering dedication, loyal service, and countless sacrifices for a company I had helped build from a modest operation into a global enterprise, I was handed an ultimatum with barely 30 minutes on the clock to make a decision that would alter the entire trajectory of my life. I chose resignation. But I composed my own version of that letter, a carefully constructed single sentence containing exactly 42 words. Each word was deliberately selected, strategically placed, and legally bulletproof. It was a sentence that would ultimately cost them everything they believed they had gained. 5 days after that fateful afternoon, their lead corporate attorney telephoned my home at precisely 7:43 in the morning. His voice was strained, barely containing what I could only describe as controlled panic. "Ms. Thornton, we urgently need to discuss the specific language contained in your resignation letter." Marcus Chin, the chief financial officer, fell completely silent when I carefully explained exactly what my words actually meant and what they were now legally obligated to provide me. But allow me to transport you back to the very beginning. Let me explain precisely how I found myself seated in that sterile conference room at 4:17 on a Friday afternoon in late October 2025. Watching 4 corporate executives slowly realize they had just committed a catastrophic error, one that would ultimately cost them everything they thought they had cleverly secured. My name is Evelyn Thornton, and I am 46 years old. For 21 consecutive years, I served as Senior Director of Global Operations at Meridian Technologies, a software development corporation headquartered in Seattle, Washington. The company specialized in enterprise resource planning solutions designed specifically for manufacturing organizations across multiple continents. I began my journey in July 2004 as a junior operations analyst, fresh from completing my graduate studies with an MBA from Washington State University. My starting salary was a modest $42,000 annually, and I resided in a cramped studio apartment that consumed more than half of my monthly income just for rent. Those early days were filled with long hours, steep learning curves, and an unwavering determination to prove my worth. By October 2025, my total annual compensation had climbed to $196,000, supplemented by quarterly performance bonuses, comprehensive healthcare benefits, and stock options I had carefully accumulated over 2 decades of dedicated service. I managed a department comprising 43 professionals spread across 3 continents: North America, Europe, and Asia. My division alone generated $67 million in annual revenue for the corporation. I was not merely another employee occupying a corner office with an impressive title printed on my door. I was the living institutional memory that kept Meridian Technologies functioning smoothly day after day, year after year. When our chief executive officer forgot critical details about a major client relationship dating back 15 years, my telephone rang. When the finance department needed historical data from 2008 that no longer existed in any current database system, they contacted me directly. When board members demanded explanations for why certain operational processes existed or why specific decisions had been made years ago, I provided those comprehensive answers. My email archives stretched back 21 years, meticulously organized into thousands of folders and subfolders. I maintained vendor relationships that predated most of our current staff members' employment. I understood the nuances of contract negotiations that had occurred before half our management team had even completed their university degrees. I possessed the kind of deep institutional knowledge that cannot be taught in business schools or acquired through weekend seminars. For 21 years, I was absolutely indispensable, until suddenly, without warning, I wasn't. The troubles began precisely 8 months before that October confrontation. In February 2025, Meridian Technologies was acquired by Apex Corporate Holdings, an enormous conglomerate valued at approximately $12.7 billion. Apex specialized in purchasing medium-sized technology companies, systematically eliminating their expensive and experienced employees, and replacing them with recent university graduates who would accept substantially lower compensation packages without raising objections or asking difficult questions. I had witnessed this exact pattern destroy 3 competing companies in our industry over the preceding 18 months. I recognized the warning signs immediately. I knew precisely what was approaching like a gathering storm on the horizon. The acquisition playbook they followed never varied in its essential elements. New management teams arrive making reassuring promises about stability, continuity, and respecting the existing corporate culture. They deliver speeches filled with hollow words about valuing experience and preserving institutional knowledge. Then, within months, they systematically eliminate anyone earning above $135,000 annually, replacing them with fresh university graduates making $65,000 who lack the experience to recognize they're being exploited and the confidence to demand better treatment. The acquisition officially finalized on February 14, 2025, Valentine's Day. The irony of that date was not lost on me. A day celebrating love and commitment became the day our company was absorbed by an entity that viewed employees as nothing more than line items on a spreadsheet, numbers to be reduced and optimized for shareholder value. The new management team arrived at our headquarters on February 22nd, exactly 8 days later. Our new chief executive officer was Bradley Morrison, age 35, holding an MBA from Yale University. He had previously served as an executive at a technology startup that managed to burn through $45 million in venture capital funding before collapsing spectacularly, leaving behind nothing but empty offices and unpaid vendors. Despite this failure, he possessed the unshakable confidence of someone who had never experienced genuine consequences for his mistakes. He had zero practical experience in enterprise software operations, yet he walked through our halls as though he had personally invented the industry. The new chief financial officer was Marcus Chin, 33 years old, formerly a senior consultant at one of the prestigious global consulting firms. He was absolutely brilliant when it came to financial modeling, Excel spreadsheets, and creating impressive PowerPoint presentations filled with charts and projections. However, he was completely ignorant about how actual businesses operated on a day-to-day level. He understood numbers in the abstract, but had never managed real people doing real work under real constraints. The new chief strategy officer was Nathan Blackwood, 37 years old. He had been a vice president at Apex Corporate for exactly 19 months and believed he understood everything there was to know about software companies because he had once managed one for 9 months before it failed catastrophically. His failure had been quietly attributed to market conditions rather than his own incompetence, and he had moved on to bigger roles with his confidence entirely intact. They scheduled a mandatory company-wide meeting for March 3rd at 10 o'clock in the morning. Bradley stood in our main conference room, a space I had personally designed when we relocated to this building in 2013. I had selected every piece of furniture, negotiated every equipment contract, even chosen the specific shade of gray paint for the walls after examining 17 different samples. Now this stranger stood there, delivering the standard corporate acquisition speech I had heard nearly word for word from 3 other companies facing similar fates. "We're incredibly excited about this partnership," he announced with rehearsed enthusiasm that fooled absolutely nobody with genuine corporate experience. His smile was too wide, his words too polished, his sincerity too practiced. "Nothing fundamental is going to change. We deeply value your contributions. Your positions are completely secure. Together, we're going to achieve unprecedented levels of success." He paused, letting his words sink in, apparently believing they would have their intended soothing effect. Apex acquired Meridian specifically because of the exceptional talent assembled here, and we're committed to preserving that culture and expertise. You are what makes this company valuable, and we recognize that. I had heard this identical speech before, delivered with the same false sincerity by executives who didn't mean a single word they were saying. I had learned through bitter experience that when executives promise nothing will change, it means everything is about to change dramatically. The more emphatically they promise stability, the more certain you can be that destruction is imminent. I began updating my resume that very evening at 10:23 p.m., sitting at my dining room table with a glass of Cabernet Sauvignon. The house was quiet, my husband already asleep upstairs, and I methodically documented 21 years of accomplishments, responsibilities, and achievements while the wine slowly disappeared. But I also started doing something else that night, something my father had taught me during his 32 years as a construction foreman fighting for workers' rights against powerful contractors and corporate interests. I started documenting absolutely everything. Every email exchange that seemed remotely significant. Every process document that described how things actually worked. Every contract clause that might prove relevant. Every vendor agreement that I had negotiated or maintained. Every client relationship detail that existed only in my memory. Every policy, every procedure, every meeting summary, every conversation that might later prove important. I backed everything up to 3 separate encrypted external hard drives that I kept secured in different locations, one at home, one in a bank safety deposit box, and one at my sister's house 40 miles away. I used military-grade encryption software that would take the most powerful computers on Earth centuries to crack. I had learned this crucial lesson from watching other companies get acquired and systematically gut their experienced staff. The pattern was always the same. They terminate you on a Friday afternoon, immediately lock you out of all computer systems, cancel your building access cards, and suddenly you possess zero proof of anything you accomplished and no leverage whatsoever to negotiate reasonable terms. You're left standing in the parking lot with a cardboard box of personal belongings and no recourse. I refused to let that happen to me. The termination started in March, exactly 4 weeks after the acquisition officially closed. On March 24th at 8:47 in the morning, they fired 15 people. Every single one was over 42 years old. Every single one earned more than $118,000 annually. Every single one possessed multiple decades of experience and institutional knowledge that would take years to replace. They replaced all 15 within 6 weeks with recent college graduates making less than half the salary. Young, eager, desperate for work, willing to accept whatever terms were offered without negotiation. Human Resources called it organizational realignment. They distributed talking points about streamlining operations and positioning for future growth. I called it what it actually was: systematic age discrimination and wage theft disguised in corporate euphemisms. But I kept my observations private, my opinions to myself. I continued documenting every single termination, noting the age and salary of each person removed. I documented every replacement hire, noting their youth and lower compensation. I saved every email where age or compensation was mentioned as a factor in staffing decisions. I recorded key meetings using my smartphone's voice recording app, perfectly legal under Washington state's one-party consent law, though I kept that detail to myself. In April, they began targeting me specifically. Small things at first, subtle enough to provide plausible deniability. They started excluding me from meetings I had attended for years without exception. On April 18th, there was a quarterly strategic planning session, a meeting I had facilitated for 9 consecutive years, helping shape the company's direction and priorities. This year, my calendar invitation was simply canceled without explanation. When I asked Bradley directly about this exclusion, he responded with casual dismissiveness that barely concealed his contempt. "Oh, we're bringing fresh perspectives to that process. We appreciate your past contributions, though." Past contributions. As though I were already gone, already relegated to history, a relic of an earlier era that no longer held relevance. On April 29th, they reassigned 4 of my primary responsibilities to a 28-year-old manager named Tyler, who had been with the company for exactly 10 months and possessed absolutely no understanding of our legacy systems or the complex vendor relationships I had spent years cultivating. Tyler was pleasant enough, eager to please, but utterly unqualified for what he was being asked to do. He didn't know what he didn't know, and nobody was going to tell him. On May 15th, during a department-wide meeting with my entire team present, 43 professionals who had worked alongside me for years, they openly questioned my decision-making abilities. Marcus made pointed comments implying I was out of touch with contemporary operational methodologies and resistant to innovation. Classic corporate intimidation tactics designed to humiliate me in front of my colleagues and make me quit voluntarily so they wouldn't have to pay proper severance. But I refused to quit. Every morning, I woke up at 5:30, exercised for an hour, showered, dressed professionally, and drove to the office. I continued showing up every single day, performing my job flawlessly, delivering results that exceeded expectations, documenting every slight, every exclusion, every undermining comment, every instance of disrespect. My documentation files grew thicker by the day. My personnel file was absolutely spotless after 21 years. Outstanding performance evaluations every single year without exception. Zero disciplinary actions of any kind. Multiple recognition awards, including Operations Excellence in 2017, Leadership Innovation in 2019, and Distinguished Service Award in 2022. 3 different CEOs had personally thanked me for contributions that had saved the company millions of dollars. They couldn't terminate me for cause, and they absolutely knew it. My record was bulletproof. So they would have to find another way. On June 27th, they attempted a different strategy. Marcus called me into his office at 4:45 in the afternoon on a Friday, always a terrible sign. Friday afternoon meetings invariably mean bad news. They're scheduled late specifically so you have no time to react, no colleagues to consult, and an entire weekend to stew in anxiety before you can speak to anyone who might help. His office was on the executive floor, all glass walls and expensive furniture, with a view of Puget Sound that I had enjoyed countless times during better days. Now the view felt cold, the office sterile and unwelcoming. "Evelyn, please sit down," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. His tone was carefully neutral, rehearsed. "We're restructuring operations to align with Apex's global framework. We're eliminating your current position and creating a new role called Senior Operations Coordinator. You're welcome to apply for it, but I should be transparent. The compensation is significantly reduced. The new salary would be $97,000 annually." I had been earning $196,000 plus substantial quarterly bonuses. This represented a $99,000 pay cut for essentially identical responsibilities with a slightly different title. It was textbook constructive dismissal disguised as corporate restructuring, making working conditions so intolerable that a reasonable person would be forced to resign. I smiled pleasantly, keeping my expression neutral despite the anger burning in my chest. "I'll need some time to consider this carefully," I said. "It's a significant change, and I want to make sure I understand all the implications." "Of course," Marcus replied, clearly expecting me to fold immediately. "Take the weekend. But we'll need your decision by Monday morning. The restructuring needs to move forward." I went directly home and called Elizabeth Hartley, an employment attorney I had retained in April when the warning signs became impossible to ignore. Elizabeth had 31 years of experience specializing in employment law, with particular expertise in wrongful termination cases involving age discrimination. She had represented over 200 employees in disputes with large corporations and maintained a success rate of 83%. She charged $475 per hour, and I had already paid her $5,200 for 11 consultations preparing for this exact moment. "They're attempting to force you out through constructive dismissal," Elizabeth said immediately when I explained the situation. Her voice was calm but firm, the voice of someone who had seen this scenario play out hundreds of times. "That compensation reduction offer is textbook. They know most people will either quit in frustration or accept the reduced role out of fear. Don't accept it under any circumstances. Wait for them to make the next move and continue documenting absolutely everything." I waited for exactly 41 days. On August 7th at 3:15 in the afternoon, I received the communication I had been anticipating. Bradley's executive assistant sent an email with the subject line, "Meeting request, urgent. Mr. Morrison would like to meet with you in conference room D at 3:45 p.m. today. Please make yourself available immediately." Conference room D, not his office. That meant witnesses. That meant official business. That meant termination. I printed out my resignation letter, the one Elizabeth and I had drafted 4 weeks earlier after multiple revisions, each word carefully chosen for maximum legal effect. I folded it carefully and placed it in my jacket pocket. Then I walked to conference room D with steady steps, my heart pounding, but my face composed. At exactly 3:45 in the afternoon, I entered conference room D. Bradley, Marcus, Nathan, and Sandra Mitchell from Human Resources were already seated on one side of the long mahogany conference table like a panel of judges evaluating a defendant. For leather portfolios were arranged in front of them. For matching pens. For matching expressions of false sympathy that didn't reach their eyes. Bradley gestured toward the chair positioned across from them, the defendant's chair, isolated on its own side of the table, facing the prosecution. The power dynamic was unmistakable and clearly intentional. I sat down calmly. I had mentally rehearsed this exact moment at least 70 times, lying awake at night visualizing every possible scenario, preparing responses for every conceivable statement they might make. Evelyn, thank you for making time to meet with us on such short notice. Bradley began with forced friendliness that rang hollow in the sterile conference room. We need to discuss your future with Meridian Technologies. Translation: we're terminating you. As you're aware, we've been restructuring our operations to align with Apex's global operational framework. We've made some difficult decisions about our leadership structure moving forward. He paused, as though delivering genuinely difficult news rather than a pre-planned corporate execution. After extensive consideration, we've decided to move in a different direction with the operations leadership role. Translation: you're fired, and we're hiring someone younger and cheaper. I said nothing, just waited. Elizabeth had coached me extensively during our sessions together. Let them talk. Let them make their threats. Observe everything. Stay completely calm. Don't give them any reaction they can use against you. Marcus jumped in, his voice dripping with false sympathy that made my stomach turn. This is obviously a difficult situation, Evelyn. We recognize your many years of service to this organization, but we believe it's best for everyone involved, including you, to pursue new opportunities elsewhere. We're prepared to offer you two options. He slid a manila folder across the polished table toward me. Inside were two documents, both already prepared, just waiting for my signature. They had clearly been planning this for weeks, if not months. Option 1, Marcus continued smoothly. You resign effective immediately. We'll provide 3 weeks of severance compensation. That's $11,308 based on your current salary, plus your accrued vacation time. We'll provide a neutral reference for future employers. Clean break, minimal complications. You leave with your dignity intact. 3 weeks of severance after 21 years of dedicated service. That was deliberately insulting. Washington state law didn't require any severance at all for at-will employees, and they knew it perfectly well. They were counting on me being too frightened or too exhausted to fight for what I actually deserved. Option 2, Nathan added with barely concealed smugness, clearly enjoying his role in this corporate theater. We terminate you for restructuring purposes. You receive nothing. No severance payment, no vacation payout, nothing. And we note in your employment file that your position was eliminated due to operational redundancy, which I'm sure you understand doesn't create the most favorable impression for future employment opportunities. That was a threat, a clumsy, obvious threat, but a threat nonetheless. They were telling me in no uncertain terms, take the pittance we're offering, or we'll make it harder for you to find work elsewhere. We'll poison the well with future employers. I opened the folder slowly, examining its contents. Inside was a pre-written resignation letter on Meridian Technologies' letterhead. All I needed to do was sign at the bottom where a small X marked the signature line. The letter read, I, Evelyn Thornton, hereby resign from my position as Senior Director of Global Operations at Meridian Technologies effective immediately. I understand that I will receive 3 weeks of severance compensation and accrued vacation time as my final settlement. I release Meridian Technologies and Apex Corporate Holdings from any and all claims related to my employment or the termination thereof. It was a trap. If I signed that document, I would be permanently waiving all my rights to pursue legal action for age discrimination, constructive dismissal, or wrongful termination, all for $11,308. Less than 1 month's salary after 2 decades of service. I looked at all four of them, taking my time to study each face. Young, confident, absolutely certain they had backed me into a corner with no possible escape. Bradley kept checking his expensive smartwatch, probably had dinner reservations at 6 p.m. at some trendy restaurant. Marcus was smirking slightly, clearly enjoying his perceived power over someone who had been with the company since before he graduated high school. Nathan was leaning back in his leather chair like this meeting was already concluded and he had won decisively. Sandra from HR looked vaguely uncomfortable but wasn't going to speak up. I thought about my father, who had spent 32 years as a construction foreman fighting for workers' rights, often against impossible odds. He had faced down corporate lawyers, angry contractors, and powerful executives who thought they could push around ordinary working people. He never backed down, never accepted less than he deserved, never let anyone bully him into submission. He taught me one critical lesson when I was 15 years old and got my first job at a retail store, folding clothes for minimum wage. Never sign anything without reading it 3 times, he had said, his calloused hands wrapped around a cup of coffee at our kitchen table. And never let people in expensive suits bully you just because they have fancy titles and corner offices. They're not smarter than you, they're just more confident. You have rights under the law. Know them and use them. I looked up from the folder and met Bradley's eyes directly. I'll resign, I said calmly. Relief flooded their faces immediately, so obvious they couldn't hide it. Bradley actually smiled broadly, probably already mentally moving on to his evening plans. Excellent decision, Evelyn. Very professional of you. We knew you'd see reason. If you could just sign right here on the line. I'll write my own resignation letter, I interrupted firmly. The smiles faltered slightly. A flicker of confusion crossed Marcus's face. Well, we've prepared one that covers all the necessary legal language and formalities. There's really no need. I'll write my own, I repeated, my voice steady and calm. Unless you're planning to dictate what specific words I'm allowed to use in my personal resignation letter, I wasn't aware that was standard corporate policy. Bradley hesitated. He couldn't force me to use their letter without admitting this entire process was coerced, which would undermine everything they were trying to accomplish. Fine, he said, the friendliness in his voice cooling noticeably. Write your own letter if you prefer. But we need it by end of business today. 5 p.m. sharp. You'll have it within 1 hour, I said, standing up. I'll bring it directly to this room. I walked out of conference room D at 3:57 p.m., leaving them sitting there with their pre-written documents and their matching pens and their premature sense of victory. Behind me, I could hear them murmuring to each other, probably congratulating themselves on handling the situation so smoothly. I returned to my office, closed the door firmly, and locked it. My hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I had prepared for this moment for months, and now it was finally here. I opened my laptop and pulled up the document I had saved weeks earlier. I had actually written my resignation letter 4 weeks ago during a sleepless night when I knew this confrontation was inevitable. I drafted it with Elizabeth's expert help during a 6-hour video call that stretched past midnight. We had gone through every single word, every comma, every period, analyzing potential legal implications from every possible angle. The letter was 1 sentence long, 42 words carefully chosen for maximum effect. I read it for probably the 75th time, my lips moving silently. I, Evelyn Thornton, hereby resign from my position as Senior Director of Global Operations at Meridian Technologies, such resignation to become effective upon receipt of complete settlement of all compensation, benefits, stock options, and other amounts owed to me under my employment agreement, applicable company policies, and Washington state law. I sent the document to Elizabeth via encrypted message. They just delivered the ultimatum. Resign or be terminated. Is this still our strategy? She replied in under 3 minutes. Perfect timing. Send it exactly as written. Don't add anything. Don't explain anything. Don't answer any questions about what it means. Just that 1 sentence. Then wait. I printed the letter on Meridian Technologies letterhead. I signed it with my full legal name in blue ink, specifically blue, because photocopies show up in black, and I wanted it clear this was an original document. I made 4 copies. 1 for human resources. one for my personal records, one for Elizabeth, one for my safety deposit box. Then I walked back to conference room D at 4:17 p.m., exactly 20 minutes after I had left. Bradley, Marcus, Nathan, and Sandra were still there, now with coffee cups in front of them, probably celebrating their perceived victory prematurely. They looked relaxed, almost jovial, like people who had successfully concluded a difficult negotiation. I handed Bradley the letter without speaking a single word. He skimmed it quickly, barely reading, already mentally moving on to other matters. Fine, fine. This is acceptable. HR will process your final compensation within the standard time frame. I'll need all the severance details in writing, I interrupted, including exact amounts, payment timeline, and specific confirmation of what's included. Marcus rolled his eyes in that condescending way young executives do when dealing with people they consider beneath them or behind the times. 3 weeks' salary, we already told you. $11,308. It'll be in your final paycheck, processed within 2 weeks. And my accrued vacation time, I continued. I have 147.5 hours accrued. That should be included. Fine, yes. That's included. And my outstanding expense reimbursements. I submitted receipts for $4,512 from the client meeting in Chicago last month that hasn't been processed yet. We'll include everything, Nathan said dismissively, already standing up to leave. You can go now. HR will contact you tomorrow about returning your laptop and access credentials. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings. I left the conference room at 4:24 p.m. on August 7, 2025. I went in my office one final time and packed my personal items into 3 cardboard boxes. Photographs of my family. My favorite coffee mug from a conference in Barcelona in 2016. A small desk plant my team had given me for my 20th anniversary with the company. My fountain pen, a gift from a mentor who had retired years ago. My phone was already buzzing with text messages from team members asking what had happened, but I didn't respond to anyone. Elizabeth had been absolutely clear, radio silence until they figure it out. Don't explain. Don't clarify. Don't respond to anyone. Security escorted me to my car at 5:15 p.m. I drove home through rush hour traffic, set the boxes in my living room, poured a generous glass of wine, and waited. They figured it out 5 days later. Tuesday, August 12th, 7:43 in the morning. My phone rang with an unknown number displaying a Seattle area code. I answered on the 4th ring, keeping my voice neutral. Evelyn Thornton speaking. Ms. Thornton, this is Jonathan Rhodes, General Counsel for Apex Corporate Holdings. I need to discuss your resignation letter with you immediately. This is an urgent matter. Are you available to talk right now? I set down my coffee cup and smiled. Here we go. Of course, Mr. Rhodes. How can I help you this morning? There's some confusion about the language you used in your resignation letter. Specifically, the phrase effective upon receipt of complete settlement of all compensation, benefits, stock options, and other amounts owed under my employment agreement and applicable law. Can you clarify what exactly you meant by that particular phrasing? I opened my laptop to the detailed spreadsheet I had prepared with Elizabeth over the past several weeks. 67 tabs, color-coded with supporting documentation for every single line item. Thousands of hours of meticulous preparation had gone into this document. Certainly, Mr. Rhodes. It's quite straightforward if you read it carefully. My resignation becomes effective when I receive complete settlement of all amounts owed to me under my employment agreement and applicable Washington state law. Until that settlement is received in full, my resignation has not taken effect. Which means I remain an employee of Meridian Technologies with all rights, benefits, and protections thereof. Silence. Very long silence. I could hear papers rustling on his end, someone whispering urgently in the background. I'm sorry, Jonathan finally said, his voice noticeably tighter than before. Can you repeat that? My resignation is conditional, Mr. Rhodes. It's effective upon, meaning contingent upon, receipt of complete settlement. That's basic contract law. An event is effective upon another event when the first event doesn't occur until the second event is completed. My resignation doesn't become effective until you pay me everything you legally owe me under my employment contract and Washington state law. This is standard conditional language that's been upheld in numerous court cases. More silence. More rustling of papers. I heard what sounded like a door closing and footsteps, as though he was moving to a more private location. And what exactly do you believe we owe you? I'm glad you asked. Let me provide a detailed breakdown. I have everything documented here. I pulled up my spreadsheet. 67 tabs. Thousands of hours of meticulous documentation. First, my base salary through the date of resignation. $15,076.92. Second, accrued vacation time. I have 147.5 hours at my hourly rate of $94.23. That's $13,898.93. Third, outstanding expense reimbursements totaling $4,512. Those three items total $33,487.85. However, that's just the beginning. What do you mean, the beginning? His voice had gone up slightly in pitch. Fourth, my annual performance bonus for fiscal year 2025. Section 6.3 of my employment agreement, signed April 12, 2018, guarantees an annual performance bonus of 15% of base salary for meeting operational targets, with an additional 5% for exceeding targets by more than 10%. I didn't merely meet all targets this year, I exceeded them by substantial margins. Our operations division generated $67 million in revenue, 17% above projections. The bonus is payable upon termination of employment for any reason, as clearly stated in paragraph 3 of that section. That amounts to $39,200. I heard something drop on his end. Maybe a pen. Maybe a coffee cup. Maybe his jaw. Hold on, we need to review. Fifth, I continued calmly, not allowing him to interrupt. My stock options. I have 57,000 stock options granted in my 2020 compensation package. Section 9.2 of that agreement states they vest immediately upon a change of control of the company. Apex's acquisition of Meridian clearly triggered the change of control provision. At current market value of $23.45 per share, those options are worth $1,336,650. The silence now was absolutely profound. I could picture Jonathan frantically calculating numbers on a notepad, his face getting progressively redder with each digit. Sixth, my severance package. Section 8.5 of my employment agreement, which I can email you right now if you'd like to verify, states that if my employment is terminated without cause, or if I resign for good reason within 24 months of a change of control, I'm entitled to 18 months of salary continuation plus benefits continuation. Good reason is specifically defined in Section 8.5.2 as including any material reduction in responsibilities, which occurred on April 29th when my primary duties were reassigned to Tyler without my consent. That's $294,000 in salary plus approximately $47,250 in health insurance premiums and other benefits. You're saying we owe you over $1.7 million? His voice had gone up a full octave, barely controlled panic evident in every syllable. $1,750,587.85 to be exact, plus interest accruing at the statutory rate of 12% annually under Washington Revised Code Section 49.48.010, calculated from August 7th. And since my resignation hasn't become effective yet, I'm still technically employed, which means I'm still accruing salary at my daily rate of $753.85, still covered by company health insurance at your expense, still entitled to all benefits and protections of employment, including my office access, my email account, my corporate credit card, my parking space, and my participation in the 401k matching program. This is absurd. You can't simply. Actually, Mr. Rhodes, I can. And I did. I consulted extensively with Elizabeth Hartley at Hartley Employment Law. Perhaps you've heard of her? She's argued 6 cases before the Washington State Supreme Court on employment contract interpretation, winning 5 of them. She's reviewed my resignation letter extensively and assures me it's completely ironclad. Conditional resignations are perfectly legal in Washington and have been upheld repeatedly in case law. The leading case is Morrison v. Pacific Industries, 2019, which established that conditional resignation language is enforceable when the conditions are specific and tied to contractual obligations. I paused, letting that sink in. Your management team forced me to choose between resigning or being terminated. I chose resignation, but I made it conditional upon receiving what I'm legally owed under my contract. Your team accepted my resignation without reading it carefully. They were so eager to push me out that they didn't notice the conditional language. That's your mistake, Mr. Rhodes. Not mine. We'll fight this in court. We have substantial legal resources. You absolutely should consider litigation, I said pleasantly, almost cheerfully. Hire your expensive lawyers. Spend 6 figures on legal fees. Drag this out for months or years. But I should mention that I've already prepared a charge for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission documenting systematic age discrimination. I have comprehensive documentation of 26 employees over age 40 being terminated since the acquisition and replaced with younger workers making significantly less money. I have emails from Bradley Morrison dated May 8th explicitly discussing, and I quote, reducing headcount among our more expensive senior employees to improve our cost structure. I have recordings legally obtained under Washington's two-party consent law, since I informed participants that meetings might be recorded for documentation purposes of conversations where Marcus Chin discussed replacing me with, and I quote again, fresh young talent who won't question every decision we make. I have Nathan Blackwood's text messages from June 22nd calling me a dinosaur who can't adapt to modern business realities. All of it is admissible. All of it is timestamped. All of it is backed up in multiple secure locations. The silence on the line was the sound of a corporate lawyer realizing his clients had just handed a disgruntled employee a winning lottery ticket and then demanded she cash it. Or, I continued calmly, you can pay me what you legally owe me under my employment contract. I'll sign a proper release with mutual non-disparagement clauses, and we all move on with our lives. Your choice, Mr. Rhodes. But I should mention that every day you delay, my statutory interest accrues at 12% annually. And every day I remain technically employed, I continue earning my daily salary of $753.85 plus benefits. The meter is running. Every hour you spend deciding is costing your client more money. He hung up without saying goodbye. I poured myself another cup of coffee and waited, feeling more relaxed than I had in months. 3 hours and 27 minutes later, my phone rang again. Marcus Chin. He was decidedly not calm. What the hell did you do? He screamed before I could even say hello. His voice was raw, almost hysterical. Good morning, Marcus. I resigned, as you requested. Is there a problem? You tricked us. You deliberately wrote that resignation letter too. I wrote a legally valid resignation letter, I interrupted calmly. You accepted it without reading it carefully. You had 4 people in that conference room, including someone from Human Resources whose job is specifically to review employment documents, and none of you apparently noticed that I'd made my resignation conditional. How is that my fault? I didn't hide anything. The language was right there in black and white. The board is absolutely furious. Bradley is getting calls from Apex headquarters every hour. Our CEO in New York wants to know why we're suddenly on the hook for nearly $2 million to an employee we thought we'd terminated. I haven't been terminated, Marcus. That's precisely the point. I'm still employed because my resignation hasn't become effective yet. You can't terminate someone who has already resigned. You can only fulfill the conditions of that resignation. We're not paying you a single penny of that bonus or those stock options. This is extortion. Then don't pay me, I said pleasantly, almost sweetly. Keep me employed. Continue my salary at $15,076.92 per pay period. Keep me on the health insurance at your expense. Let me keep accruing 401k matching contributions. Oh, and I'll need my office access restored since I'm still technically an employee. And my email account. And my corporate credit card. And actually, since I'm still employed, but you've given my responsibilities to other people, I'm essentially being paid my full salary to do nothing. Which I'm completely fine with. I can wait as long as you want. I have excellent patience. He was sputtering now, literally unable to form coherent words. I could almost picture him, face red, veins bulging in his forehead, expensive suit suddenly feeling too tight. We'll see you for. For what, Marcus? Writing a resignation letter? Using conditional language in a legal document? Knowing my rights under my employment contract? Understanding the terms I agreed to when I signed those documents years ago? Good luck with that lawsuit. But while you're considering litigation, you should know that I've already prepared my EOC charge for age discrimination. I have documentation of 26 employees over age 40 being terminated and replaced with younger workers making significantly less money. I have emails and recordings proving discriminatory intent. That investigation will take months, possibly years. And the longer you drag this out, the more documentation I accumulate and the bigger the potential damages become. He hung up on me without another word. 28 minutes later, my work email reactivated. Someone in IT had panicked and restored my access, probably because a lawyer told them I was technically still employed and they could face additional legal problems for locking an active employee out of company systems. I logged in and found an email chain that had accidentally been forwarded to me, probably by someone who didn't realize my access had been restored. The thread included Bradley, Marcus, Nathan, Jonathan Rhodes, and 4 other Apex corporate attorneys. The subject line was, Urgent, Thornton resignation issue, legal exposure assessment. They had forwarded my resignation letter to 7 different employment law firms for outside opinions. All 7 had confirmed the same conclusion: conditional resignation, legally valid. Enforceable. Extremely expensive mistake by management. One attorney's response was particularly satisfying. You accepted a conditional resignation without recognizing it was conditional. This is an unforced error. Ms. Thornton is correct about every item, the bonus, the stock options, the severance, all of it. Your company is legally obligated for the full amount unless you want to litigate, which risks even bigger damages for age discrimination and wrongful termination. My strong recommendation is immediate settlement. Every day you delay increases your exposure. Jonathan Rhodes called me again at 6:18 that evening. Ms. Thornton, Apex would like to discuss a settlement to resolve this matter quickly and amicably. We believe it's in everyone's interest to move forward. I'm listening, I said, settling into my favorite armchair with a glass of wine. We're prepared to offer you $975,000 as full and final settlement of all claims. That includes everything: salary, vacation, expenses, bonus, options, severance. A comprehensive package. Take it or leave it. I'll leave it. Thank you anyway. Ms. Thornton, as I explained to you this morning, you owe me $1,750,587.85 minimum under my employment contract. If you don't pay what's legally owed, I remain employed indefinitely and I file suit. Discovery will be absolutely fascinating. I have 21 years of internal records, communications, and documentation. I know where all the bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking. Ms. Thornton, please be reasonable. I am being reasonable, Mr. Rhodes. I'm asking for exactly what my contract entitles me to. Nothing more, nothing less. You're the ones who tried to force me out with 3 weeks severance after 21 years of dedicated service. That wasn't reasonable. That was insulting. Silence. I could hear him conferring with someone in the background, voices low and urgent. $1.3 million. Final offer. But you have to decide right now, tonight. $1,750,587.85, plus attorney's fees of $67,925. Elizabeth has been very busy on my behalf these past several months, and her time is valuable. I need the full amount within 15 business days via wire transfer. And I want a signed letter of recommendation from Bradley Morrison on company letterhead, stating I was an exemplary employee who contributed significantly to Meridian's success over my 21-year tenure. You'll also agree to a mutual non-disparagement clause preventing either party from making negative public statements about the other. Mr. Morrison won't agree to write. Then I remain employed and I file suit tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp. Your choice, Mr. Rhodes. But I should mention again that every day you delay costs you an additional $753.85 in my daily salary, plus benefits, plus accruing interest. And once I file suit, that settlement number is going to include emotional distress damages, punitive damages for willful age discrimination, and attorney's fees that will be substantially higher than what I'm asking for now. The price goes up every day you wait. I'm a very patient person, but my patience has a cost. He called me back at 8:47 p.m. Deal. We'll wire the funds within 15 business days. You'll receive the letter of recommendation by Friday. Our lawyers will send the settlement agreement for your review by tomorrow afternoon. This conversation is concluded. On September 5th, 2025, at 1:18 in the afternoon, I received a wire transfer notification on my phone. The amount, $1,818,512.85. The complete settlement plus attorney's fees, transferred in full. The same day, FedEx delivered an overnight envelope containing a signed letter of recommendation on Apex Corporate Holdings letterhead with Bradley Morrison's signature at the bottom. The letter praised my 21 years of exemplary service, operational excellence, and invaluable contributions to Meridian Technologies' success and growth. It noted my exceptional leadership, strategic thinking, and commitment to excellence, and strongly recommended me for any future opportunities. I seriously doubt Bradley wrote a single word of it himself. In fact, I'm certain a lawyer composed every carefully chosen phrase. But his signature was there in blue ink, and that was what mattered. Elizabeth reviewed the settlement agreement in its entirety, all 58 pages of dense legal language. Standard release provisions. Mutual non-disparagement clauses. Confidentiality provisions regarding the specific settlement terms. Nothing unusual, nothing concerning, nothing that would limit my rights in unexpected ways. I signed it on September 8, 2025. My resignation officially became effective on September 8, 2025, at 3:22 in the afternoon. I was no longer an employee of Meridian Technologies. I had successfully negotiated a settlement of over $1.8 million from a company that had tried to force me out with $11,308. The wine that evening tasted particularly sweet. The epilogue to this story is deeply satisfying to report. Bradley Morrison lasted exactly 8 more months at Meridian before being terminated in April 2026 for missing quarterly revenue targets by 34%. It turns out that firing all your experienced employees and replacing them with people who don't understand how anything works doesn't actually improve operational efficiency or client relationships. Who could have possibly predicted that outcome? Marcus Chin resigned in March 2026, citing irreconcilable differences with corporate leadership philosophy in his resignation letter. The irony of that phrasing was absolutely not lost on me when I heard about it from former colleagues. Nathan Blackwood remains there as of this writing, apparently managing a company that's hemorrhaging clients at an alarming rate because nobody remaining remembers how to maintain the legacy systems, or who the critical vendor contacts are, or why certain processes exist in the first place, or how to handle the complex client relationships I had nurtured for 2 decades. 5 of my former team members have contacted me in the months since my departure, each having received similar ultimatums from the new management. I connected all of them with Elizabeth. For have successfully negotiated 6-figure settlements using strategies similar to mine. The 5th is still technically employed while the company calculates how expensive it will actually be to pay her what they contractually owe, and the meter keeps running. As for me, I'm now semi-retired at 46 years old, enjoying a life I never could have imagined a year ago. I do occasional consulting work for medium-sized companies facing operational challenges, charging $625 per hour. I help them with operational optimization, process improvement, and strategic planning, all the skills I developed over 21 years that Apex thought they could discard for pennies on the dollar. But my specialty has evolved into something more personal and meaningful. I now focus primarily on career defense planning, helping experienced employees document everything, understand their employment contracts in detail, and protect themselves when management tries to force them out. I've been contacted by 23 different people in the past year alone, all facing situations similar to mine, all being systematically pushed out by companies that view experienced employees as expensive liabilities rather than valuable assets. I teach them what my father taught me all those years ago at our kitchen table. Know your rights. Every single one of them. Document everything. Emails, conversations, meetings, decisions, policies, procedures. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. Read your employment contract until you can recite it from memory. Not what you think it says, not what someone told you it says, but what it actually says in black and white. Never sign anything without reading it 3 times. And then read it once more. Never let people in expensive suits bully you just because they have fancy titles and corner offices. They're often just more confident and better dressed than you, not smarter or more deserving of respect. Never underestimate someone with decades of experience and access to competent legal counsel. Experience has value that can't be easily quantified or replaced. And always remember that the law exists to protect you, but only if you know how to use it. The lesson from my experience isn't about being vindictive or greedy. It's not about extracting maximum pain from people who wronged you, though I won't pretend there wasn't some satisfaction in watching their panic unfold. The real lesson is simpler and more important. When you work somewhere for 21 years, when you build systems and relationships and institutional knowledge that would take decades to replace, you have genuine value that cannot be easily discarded. And when a company tries to throw away that value for pennies on the dollar, treating you as nothing more than a line item to be eliminated, you have every right and every responsibility to yourself to demand what you're legally owed. They expected me to fold. They expected me to accept their insulting offer out of fear or exhaustion or the simple desire to avoid conflict. They expected me to sign their document without reading it carefully, just as they failed to read mine. They underestimated me. They underestimated 21 years of experience. They underestimated the lessons my father taught me about standing up for yourself. They underestimated what happens when you push someone too far and give them nothing left to lose. Their corporate lawyer still calls occasionally, checking in about various compliance matters related to the settlement, making sure I'm honoring the confidentiality provisions, verifying that I haven't discussed specific dollar amounts publicly.